and over these 6 days, I explored some of the snowiest regions up the north of Japan, chasing these wintry scenes, and they did not disappoint. So in this video, I'll be sharing and breaking down some of my favorite images from this trip, and also sharing the location and the stories behind them. Let's jump in. After taking the Shinkansen to Amari and picking up a car, this was my first stop. As you can see, an epic location in the snow, the red torii gates always standing out against a nice snowy white backdrop. But my challenge here was trying to add that human element, which I always like to add in my photos where possible. So these cleaner compositions are fine, and don't get me wrong, postcard type shots can still be really beautiful. But I certainly prefer when you can add another layer to these somehow, which for me often means trying to get a human or a character in there somewhere, really interacting with the scene. So with that, I managed to get this one of this couple in the frame, which might actually be my favorite from the morning. I also caught this one of a couple walking in. So a nice simple frame, but because it was so quiet, this was all I could basically capture with that human element in there. It usually is the opposite problem at location like this in Japan, just people everywhere at popular spots trying to get a shot. But this one is definitely quite remote, so making it a really peaceful place to visit. I did try and find a few other compositions, something like this with a nice framing, but again, just a person here on the bridge or something else would have just really topped it off. Still a beautiful place to visit. Next up, I had another drive ahead to Hirosaki. Thankfully for me, the snow really started to come down on my drive, and I was headed to the famous Hirosaki Castle. I wandered around here in the snow for literally hours, and honestly, the snow just got heavier and heavier. Epic conditions, but they also became quite challenging at times due to the thick snow. Much like the previous location, my main challenge here was trying to add that human element into my compositions. The white backdrop and the castle, again, really nice on its own, like these few shots, but I really wanted that human element in there to show how people were really battling the thick snow. Even just these simple compositions, almost a total whiteout, but with a character, again, just battling the elements, make for some really interesting frames. As much as I do like some of these shots, I kind of failed to find a real hero composition here. I actually wasted time trying to find one that I'd seen online with the bridge and the castle lining up nicely, only to discover after getting stumped trying to find it for quite some time that they have actually physically picked up and moved the entire castle for renovations, which is pretty crazy. As I exited the castle grounds, I also found these type of shots in the thick snow. This red bridge really popping in the snow, and of course this vending machine by the car park. I really like the balance in this shot, and it's probably one of my favorites, even though it had nothing to do with the castle. Even this simple scene of the car going around the corner, I think again just balances out nicely. These last few shots served as a bit of a reminder for me that often my preconceived ideas about a location, like trying to find that castle shot, aren't particularly helpful. At least that's what I find anyway. In conditions like this, I think I would have had more success actually just wandering around the city itself. Nevertheless, getting absolutely drenched in snow and running around the castle for a few hours was actually so much fun. Also making a quick stop at Lawson here before heading back to Amari City. So fun fact, Amari is actually one of the snowiest cities, not just in Japan, but actually in the entire world, I found out, which is pretty crazy, and it definitely lived up to this. I would have loved a bit more time to check out the city. It certainly had a nice vibe to it. I did manage to catch just a few street shots like this as the sun peeked through ever so slightly in the morning before I had to head to the station and move on to my next location. Which actually meant catching the Shinkansen train under the sea to the very northern island of Hokkaido, a city called Hakodate.
函館行きです。これから七重大中山。
I managed to capture this nice shot of the Shinkansen on my phone just after I got off at Hakodate, also catching this one on my camera of the driver, the sun just hitting his face nicely as he was about to take off. So here I was picking up another car and driving all the way up to Asahikawa. I actually only had a few hours to explore Hakodate. Definitely not enough. This city felt like a place worth spending much more time in. Even in my short visit, I found some great spots. Yes, more striking red torii gates, a ropeway leading up this beautiful mountain, and a surprisingly vibrant harbour city, much bigger than I expected. So these next few shots were all taken on the road. Unfortunately, not much time to stop. I didn't plan this part of the trip particularly well, but all basically around the Niseko area. This one here, I actually found out the back of a kombini that I stopped at. I found it a little bit hard to compose at 50mm, but this one I like, just the repetition and the color of the trucks. I also found a bunch of these thick, snowy scenes. Perhaps a bit of a novelty to someone who doesn't see heaps of snow, but I do always find them interesting. And this one, which was actually at that same kombini that I parked and walked out the back of. I think I seem to be more of a Lawson man when it comes to kombini of choice. At least for photography. I think their colors just look best, especially in the snow. Next up, one of my favorite winter cities in Japan and one I visited before, and that's Asahikawa. Not a large city by any means, but large enough and one that gets plenty of snow. Surprisingly this time, I didn't see heaps of snowfall, but there'd obviously been quite a bit around which had piled up on the streets. So mostly just street scenes here, and I did catch a little bit of snow. This one, the sun came out while it was snowing a little bit, just for a brief second, which created this beautiful light. I also really like this framing. I waited at this spot for quite a while until someone conveniently stepped right into my frame, which made for a nice composition with some leading lines. Also a few night shots. Firstly, the yellow taxi with the matching yellow sign. I always like when you can match colors like this, and also this kind of patch of steam which I hang around for quite a while, which always creates a nice mood. I also caught this truck right in the center of these leading lines, which made for another nice composition. So with that, onto my final epic conclusion of this little winter adventure, which meant I was back on the train for a couple of hours and headed to Sapporo for 2 nights. This is the largest city in Hokkaido, and boy did I catch a lot of snow. But I did film most of this on my GoPro for a POV video, so I might save most of that for next week. I have already shared a few of those shots, including this one at the start of the video. Certainly one of my favorites, perhaps ever. Just a nice special moment to capture, and a whole bunch more which I'll save for the video next week. But let me know what you think of these locations. Have you been to any? Do you plan to visit any of these spots in winter? Japan really is epic in winter, and I hope to be back next year. But for now, keep on creating and keep on growing, my friends. Catch you in the next one. Bye for now.